So recently I had a problem with my Bambu Labs P1P, and generally I guess you could call it extruder or clogging problems. Either way, it was a journey to figure out that the problem lied in an everyday function that is built into the printer, the loading and unloading function. So here is the number one reason why you should be manually loading and unloading your Bambu Labs printers. Now, some caveats to that statement: I have no idea how you manually load or unload when you have an AMS. I assume you just can't. I am also unsure about loading and unloading the A1, A1 Mini, or H2D, since I have no hands-on experience with those printers, and they seem to have a decently different form factor, at least especially in the A1 series. But some of this advice might be able to help you either way. You just may have to connect some dots that I am just unable to. Anyway, ever since I was experimenting with TPU on this machine, I have had occasional issues with the extruder just all of a sudden getting locked up and making light clicking, skipping, or grinding noises. Unfortunately, after that, this issue also occasionally happened with even simple PLAs. For a while, I was stumped on what actually caused this problem, because many times when I disassembled the extruder, there were actually no issues in sight. At least no obvious, impedances or things that would mess things up. Or maybe what was jamming it up was just too fine for me to see, especially when I'm frustrated from disassembling the extruder for like the 10th time. On the final time that I took the extruder apart, there was simply a fine, very fine strand of PLA in the gears, which I was working with Bambu support at the time and gave them that detail. Another time when I was trying to load PLA, the issue was simply that the end of the PLA strand had grown a bump that made the diameter too large to fit properly into the hole of the hot end. With these details, Bambu Labs informed me of heat creep, or at least a form of it, which I have never personally experienced or had to deal with. So the problem is that with the default way the P1P currently loads and unloads filament, as well as majority of other Bambu Labs printers, Bambu tried to implement an all-in-one solution for doing so with any filament. So it sets itself to the high temperature of 250 Celsius by default to melt just about any plastic that comes its way. The problem is that with more basic filaments that need a more basic, cooler temperature, this extra hot temperature can rise up the filament strand and get the filament to be melty outside of the hot end or other places that it's not supposed to be, which can cause issues in various ways as described before. This can affect a few different filaments, but one that has this issue more commonly from what I've seen is TPU. With its low melting temperatures and general flexibility, it can still thwart even the P1P's direct drive extruder. To my knowledge, there is no setting or option anywhere to change the default temperature for the loading and unloading processes. If there is, let me know, and this whole issue could probably be typically averted, but for now, manual loading and unloading is kind of the only way I know how to have a for sure solution to these problems. Having that security is not the only benefit either. If you are like me, you like to save as much filament as possible. You're also probably a viewer of my video about reducing the preprint purge for Bambu Labs machines. That video should be linked in the description if you haven't seen it yet. But a built-in feature of the loading process is a massive purge, which, unlike the preprint process, is typically necessary even with the P1P and without an AMS. However, it's typically only necessary due to the cutter function being built into the unloading process. If you manually unload the filament, depending on the plastic and situation, you may be able to recover more plastic on the spool strand and thusly have less purge when loading the next filament, due to this process taking the whole strand, avoiding the cutting, and retracting it in its entirety. Unfortunately, the side effect is that you will probably need to cut the end of your filament for loading next time. This is because of the strand being disfigured from sitting in the nozzle and such, but that loss from my experience is typically less than the default purge to get your new filament through what would be left in the nozzle and such when the cutter function is activated. But this can vary again due to the plastic type and or your machine's situation currently. The other side effect of doing this process is that it takes a bit longer due to having to do most of the automated process manually, but that is par for the course when it comes to a solution called manual filament loading. So let's stop talking about it and actually show how to do it, and hopefully show some first-hand demonstrations of the benefits. Okay, so right now we have Polymaker PLA White loaded, and we're going to be loading Polymaker PLA Purple to have a nice distinction and for my next project that I need. First thing, obviously, is you gotta turn on the machine. So the next thing that you want to do is get the manual unloading process started. So you would probably want to go and get your temperature set properly. You don't need to worry about your bed temperature, you only need to worry about your nozzle temperature. And you want to set it to accurately what you need, basically whatever the minimum or in between recommended setting for the filament is. So for PLA, we obviously want around 200. So we set that and we'll have it start going. Then you want to back out, and then you want to go to the movement settings and try and get your print head in the proper spot, but it's probably going to want you to home first. Yes. So let your printer do the homing process and we'll go from there. Okay, so now that it's homed, it reduced my temperature, but it put it back up automatically, so now it's building back up to 200. You want to move the print head over to roughly the area over the bucket where it normally would go anyway. It can be a little difficult to line up, but it doesn't have to be exact, it just has to be in the right place. Though, one thing you gotta remember is that it's also not going to do the wipe function, so unfortunately we do have a bit of oozing there, but it should hopefully be okay. So this is roughly where you want your head to be. Like I said, it's just so that it activates the bucket door, closes it, such, and then sits over the bucket, just in case you do get a little bit of drizzle coming out of there. Now that you have the print head in place, you want to go over to the E, which is the extruder option, and you want to select it and start pressing up. This will start retracting the filament upward rather than trying to extrude it. At the same time, while doing that, you want to kind of tug on the filament and try and pull it out just very lightly. You don't have to put too much force on it. And you're gonna feel it start pushing its way out slowly. It might take a few times of pressing the extruder, but eventually you'll feel it come loose like this, and you can re-spool your filament. There we are. And so that's how you manually unload the filament. Now, like as you can see here, because I manually unloaded it, I have a bit of a nub here from the extruder gears, and I have some little stringing. You'll probably have to clip that off. You might be able to get away with it, but just be aware of it. And remember that next time you are loading this filament. But you see how little that would be, right? Like you have that much, when if you had the normal purge, it would probably be at least like that much of your strand, something like that, maybe even more. So let's put this in the hole and let's get our next filament. Okay, so now we have our nice new spool of Polymaker Purple PLA. Make sure that you load it in with the strand going the right way, but that's for any time you're loading filament on this, normally or manually. Load it into the nozzle and try and see where it is in the Bowden tube, and try and get it just close to the nozzle, but not all the way yet. So my filament is currently right here. It's kind of hard to see in camera, at least as far as I can tell from my display. But yeah, we're right before it actually hits the actual mechanical stuff in there. Now, for some reason, it has lowered the temperature on my machine. I don't know if it's like a safety feature or something, but we're gonna bring that back up to 200. I don't know if it detected that the filament ran out or something, so that's why it lowered the temperature, but either way, we have to verify, and we're gonna bring it back up to 200. Once your hot end is back up to the right temperature for actually extruding your filament, you want to go over to your extruder function again, and then this time you'll be wanting to push down instead of up, because you want it to actually be trying to catch the filament and extrude it out through the nozzle. So at this point, when you have your temperature set properly, you want to be pushing your filament up until you feel resistance, very lightly, don't force it obviously, and you want to be getting your finger ready to push down on the extruder function at the same time as you lightly push in on the filament, and eventually it should catch. Like right now I got it. If you can, and to verify, you can like put a little resistance on the filament when you're holding it, and you should feel the machine tugging on it. So now we just hit the down on the extrude until it comes out the nozzle. And there we go, now it's starting to push some through. So then you probably want to purge until you do get to the next color, which I already am at it by the looks of it. So yeah, we've actually just officially changed the filament manually. And that's literally all there is to it, to manually loading and unloading. Just make sure that when you're done, I mean, unless you're going to start a print, of course, to cool down your printer, gotta turn it all the way to 0, something like that. There might be a cooldown setting somewhere, but I never actually found it, I don't think. So turn your nozzle to 0 so it can cool down, and then you're ready to be on your way doing whatever you need to do next. Now, I will admit there is a possibility that one way or another I am doing something wrong for this style of machine. However, as far as I know, this whole process is fairly standard in 3D printing typically. However, if something does go wrong and you think it's due to this process, let me know. I don't want to damage anyone's machines, but at the same time, I really don't think this process would cause any issues. Everything I've done is just working around the P1P's hardware to accomplish the same effect as loading an Ender 3 or Elegoo Neptune. The Bambu Labs machines just add some complications, making the process seem a little more complex than it really is. But in the end, this isn't going to be for everyone. Some people may prioritize the convenience of the built-in loading and unloading processes over the security and filament savings, but longer process of manual loading, especially if the loading and unloading process just works for them, as it has for me for a couple of years now. And you do you. I just hope that this at least helps someone some way. I made this video because I saw another guy named Burning Money talking a bit about this, sort of, but he did it specifically as a solution for using TPU on these machines, and his overall video is in kind of a different format. So I hope I'm not stepping on anyone's toes by making this video, but when I looked up manually loading and unloading Bambu Labs machines, what came up were simple tutorials about, as far as I can tell, using the fairly self-explanatory and mostly automated processes built into the machines. This guy got closer to 100,000 views by explaining the simple process of changing filaments on the P1P and P1S. It just seems stupid to me, I'm sorry. But I've needed tutorials for stupid simple things too on occasion. I still can't get soldering to work for me to save my life. Anyway, if you found this video helpful in any way, please leave a like. Again, a link to my other video about reducing the preprint purge on Bambu Labs machines should be in the description below, so check that out if that sounds interesting to you as well. I also have 3D printing related affiliate links to good stuff in the description, so please check those out. They don't add any cost to you and they help me out. I do 3D printing and music related content on this channel, among other things sometimes, so if that sounds good to you, please consider subscribing. That's all I have to say for now, so I'm gonna say bye-bye.